And to Ariel, why don't you go ahead and pick up where I left off, because you and Mountain Watch have been very involved with the rest of it.
All right. Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you to all the presenters and to the guests here of the conference. David, I want to ask you, am I on my first slide? Is this working okay?
It looks great, Ariel. I see it.
Okay, great. Well, then I'll get started. First off, I just want to share, I have a little piece of San Bruno Mountain here with me, a little rock. So I know we're all far from the mountain, but the mountain is here with us. I'm holding it here in my hand for this talk. So thank you all who are here for caring for San Bruno Mountain and for working on its behalf. I'm talking today about the people's movement to save San Bruno Mountain, and I'm focusing in on 1966 to 1976. Initially, I was going to try to do a longer period, but this decade was packed with so much that I decided to just do these 10 years. And this is really the decade that decided San Bruno Mountain State and County Park. I have a lot of slides, so I'm going to be moving through them quickly and talking a bit quickly too. But later when this presentation is uploaded on our website, you can pause it and look further at some of these photos and artifacts and materials. So in 1966, what was happening? What had San Bruno Mountain become by 1966? By 66, the mountain had become a peak platform for broadcasting TV and radio shows. You can see here the construction of these towers and the road. Initially, no road here in 1947, but a few years later, Radio Road constructed and all these radio and TV towers up on the top of San Bruno Mountain, one of the highest peaks in the northern part of San Mateo County. It had become one of the most scenic garbage dumps in the Bay Area. You can see here a lovely view with a lot of litter. And quote, "The most beautiful and valuable property in the Bay Area is being used today as a free public dump with all sorts of junk, old car hulks, tin cans, cartons, broken glass, and sometimes a dead animal or two." The mountain by 66 had been a green dream for some, a proposed grounds for a golf course. There was the Citizens Committee for more golf courses. I hope they're not in existence today. And they had proposed, they were trying to convince the Crocker Estate Company making a golf course up on San Bruno Mountain. And this was 1957 and 61. The mountain, as David just went into, had become a rock supply scheme, a proposed source of bay fill with the Crocker Land Company, the Rockefeller and banking interests from Manhattan, and the Ideal Cement Company to take all this rock and soil, the bones of the mountain, and put it on a conveyor belt over the freeway going into the bay. Luckily, that didn't happen. The mountain by 66 had also become the bucolic background for an industrial park. So here is an aerial view of Guadalupe Valley before Crocker Industrial Park. It was the ranch headquarters. Here's Brisbane. Crocker Land Company, their first big development on San Bruno Mountain was take this massive, beautiful, rustic valley and make it into an industrial park. You can see here before with the creek running through it in the past, and just some years later, by 73, full of warehouses, tracks, and trucks. But most significant here was that by 1966, San Bruno Mountain was one of the largest and, quote, choicest chunks of real estate in urban America. It had been private property since 1839. Let me take a moment here on behalf of the conference to acknowledge that San Bruno Mountain is Ramaytush Ohlone land, and that at this time there was no concept of private property in the Bay Area when they were before the arrival of the Spanish. But the first property owners of San Bruno Mountain really was this interesting bicultural family. Jacob Lease from Ohio, the first person to build a frame structure in San Francisco, in what was before San Francisco, that's the pueblo of Yerba Buena, and his wife, Rosalia Vallejo, the sister of General Mariano Vallejo. They met at a 4th of July party in 1836 and had this family, and they were deeded this land grant, this Rancho Cañada de Guadalupe, Rodeo Viejo y Visitación for San Bruno Mountain, which included San Bruno Mountain, as you can see here. It was the first instance of the mountain being privatized for this family. Later in 1884, it came to the ownership of the Crocker and to his estate, the Crocker Estate Company, that became the Crocker Land Company. Crocker was one of the 4 barons of the railroad development in the US and the West. So by 1966, the Crocker Land Company, they had already begun to think about their vision for a significant development on San Bruno Mountain. And it is beginning in this decade that the mountain's fate would be decided in many ways. So here is a booklet prepared for Crocker Land Company in '66 by Bechtel Corporation. I want to give a quick thank you to the Colma Historical Association. They showed this to me and let me photograph it when I gave a talk at their museum. And I recommend going to their museum and going for a nice stroll afterwards in the cemeteries with a beautiful view of San Bruno Mountain. But here we see a vision of their zoning of the mountain. All these areas that are red and orange, developments including high rises, low rises, houses, restaurants, shopping centers, offices, schools, and a lot more all over the mountain, in the saddle, on the south slopes. And you can see here, it looks like the Gulf people were somewhat successful or persuasive. This little area here, where the headwaters of Colma Creek is, was zoned as to be a golf course. Here's a view of the development as it was drawn out on this relief map. And we're gonna look at it a little bit closer. So this is the town center. We're looking here at the saddle. And so here they are side by side. The town center, the most intensive area with the tallest buildings, was going to be right here, leading to where the current park entrance is, and leading up towards the peak of the mountain and all over the hills and areas we now know as the upper parts of April Brook. Now, this development didn't, oh, sorry, next slide. This is what the development would have looked like as well in a sketch, and we're going to see other parts of it as well. Here is a view of looking at the mouth of the Canyon Parkway, looking east, and you can see here the view from Google Earth now. And again, side by side, you can see how intensive and how much all of these high-rise apartments and other buildings were concentrated on this part of the mountain. This was the case because, as you can see here, this saddle and these slopes are some of the areas with the gentlest topography on San Bruno Mountain. They were the easiest to develop, and thus where development was thought to concentrate best. Here are some more images of the housing, and I'll go back to that for just a moment more so you can see. And as you can see, there were plans for open space even in this initial development plan, but it was mostly in areas that were too steep to develop. Too steep to develop. But at the same time, by 1966, the struggle for San Bruno Mountain was underway in different ways. One, there was already a growing sense of injustice at the lack of open space for northern San Mateo County. There was already clear that the public was advocating for a park on the mountain. It was clear too that there were signs that there were different visions for the mountain, either as a private for-profit development or as a public park development. It was also clear that there were beginning to be disagreements between members of the county government and on one side, and on the other side, members of local city governments and also members of the public, including people who were serving on public commissions. We see here in February 1966, some of the first mention of a park on San Bruno Mountain being urged. And you can notice here that the park here, 300 to 400 acres, is already being considered for the saddle of San Bruno Mountain, the relatively gentle sloping area. At this time, the Canyon Parkway had just been constructed, and actually there was a ribbon cutting ceremony, and one of the supervisors, Fitzgerald, in a somewhat offhand comment, suggested that after the road was open, people could walk up and maybe think about where they wanted to see a park on the mountain. This comment, in a sense, raised the eyebrows of the Crocker Land Company people, but sometime later, and the date being July 1966, this initial walk happened. 150 people came out on the mountain to think about where there could be a park on the mountain. In the same article, it's noted that people were already sending letters, a steady stream of letters about keeping the mountaintop in its natural state. It's also noted that the supervisor and others were aware of that Bechtel Corporation plan, as you can see here, and that they knew that the new road, the building of the road in a sense, was partly a way of allowing development to start. The Parks Commission of the county, at this time, they were making an open space plan. and they started listing San Bruno Mountain as one of the top priorities for a park to be acquired. Now, this wasn't a universally agreed upon concept. There were actually some political disagreements over whether the mountain would make a nice park. For example, there was one battle between the mayor of Pacifica and the mayor of Daly City. Before San Bruno Mountain was initially given top consideration, but in '68, the county purchased the Maestri site in Pacifica, which is now, I believe, part of San Pedro Valley Park. And Daly City mayor was very angry that he thought this was done and that the mountain was overlooked. And that the supervisor here, Bob St. Clair, at one time in Daly City, also a player with the 49ers, and at this time also serving as the county board of supervisor, the Daly City mayor thought that he had kind of snubbed the mountain, and that people, you can see here the quote from the Daly City mayor from the Pacifica mayor telling the Daly City mayor that if he can find a day that isn't windy or foggy, I'd be glad to visit San Bruno Mountain. So the mountain was already being put down as not a nice place for a park. But still, there was pressure for this to be done. And so Fitzgerald actually started meeting with the Crocker Land Company with Sherman Eubanks, William Morton, and others to discuss the possibility for a park on the mountain. This was now '68. In December '68, the Parks Commission submitted their, again, they had revised a bit their open space plan. They resubmitted it to the County Board of Supervisors. And again, they requested that the mountain be given top priority, which was noted. However, by '69, it was clear that the county manager of San Mateo and the director of the County Parks and Recreation had begun to have divergent views from the people about San Bruno Mountain as a park. And also, they were starting to seem that they wanted to, in a sense, wait for the Crocker Land Company and in some ways cooperate with them. So for example, here's the county park director talking, and he says, quote, "We have deliberately avoided recommending parks north of San Bruno because we felt the weather was too poor." Thus, he didn't really agree with having the saddle purchased in its entirety for a park, maybe just, quote, 40 or 50 acres, and not really as an outdoor facility, but maybe more indoor facilities because, quote, he said, the mountain would not be suitable for camping or picnicking because of the winds and the cold. So this is 1969. We see here again discussions about, thoughts from these folks that if they wait for the Crocker Land Company to put out their development, there'll be areas that won't be developed because they're too steep, and thus maybe that's how the county can get those areas dedicated as a park. And again, rather than the 400 acres, what is being recommended by this, county government staff is just 50 acres. At the end of 1970, though, the Parks Commission again urged the supervisors to make money available immediately to try to purchase parts of San Bruno Mountain, but the supervisors said no. They said there was too much uncertainty. In some ways, there was an uncertainty in that they were aware that the development was in the works. They had already talked to the Crocker Land Company, but it hadn't been as publicly laid out. But soon after, a few months later, actually 1971, the plan was revealed, the Crocker Land Company to develop San Bruno Mountain. And so you can see here, this would have been 30,000 to 50,000 people on San Bruno Mountain. And already it was being noted that this was in conflict with the Regional Planning Commission's idea of these, the saddle area being a regional park. It's already beginning to be noted in newspaper articles that there is some opposition forming to this plan. So for example, there's conservationists who have opposed development for ecological and aesthetic reasons, and also other concerns like traffic congestion and actually flooding, that this development would increase the flooding issues at Colma Creek through South San Francisco. This is actually the pamphlet that Visitation Rancho released in 1971. Thanks here to David Schooley for keeping all these booklets and pamphlets filed away in our office. It's been fun to find this stuff and go through it with you. Here you can see part of the plan, and as you can note again from the zoning, they're still planning a lot of heavy development on the saddle and in other parts of the mountain all over. But again, with a heavy concentration in this saddle area on both the north and south side of the Canyon Parkway. Now, when this plan was released, it actually sparked in some ways the formation of the Save San Bruno Mountain Committee, also known as the Committee to Save San Bruno Mountain. Here is Betty Higgins. We'll see some better, clearer photos of her in a little bit at 701 Hillside Boulevard. When she heard about these plans, she put up a sign on her lawn, "Save the Mountain, you can help," with her phone number, and she was on her way to forming the committee to save San Bruno Mountain. Here's the first article talking about this newly formed committee in September 10th, 1971. And you can see here her and there were others, but in this article being noted is Sylvia Gregory, that they knew that, they were aware of the promise in the initial Parks and Open Space Plan about the saddle as a park for the people. And they wanted the county to keep the promise. They didn't want this development to change that. And so they started organizing a walk on the mountain. The theme was parks, not ticky-tacky apartments. And it was going to be on October 3rd. And they were worried about the endangered beauty of the area being, quote, threatened by hamburger stands, franchise outlets, and the 38,000 people that would follow. They invited Senator Arlen Gregorio to attend. Here's the actual letter of his response back to Betty Higgins saying that he would attend. So October 4th, the March on the Mountain is held. The first march starts at the JFK School at the mouth of the Canyon Parkway, and people of all types, young mostly and old, housewife and politician, they trek up the mountain. And you can see here the issues of injustice are already clear in people's mind. Betty says, we've been getting shortchanged, and the disparity between the South County and the North County in San Mateo. They had petitions circling for people to sign to make the mountain our park. And they had, signs, walking up together, music. A singer called Faith Petrick actually sang the famous song about the tiki-taki homes. But you can see here, there was also speakers, and one of the speakers was Elizabeth McClintock. Elizabeth McClintock was advocating for the mountain to be left as it was. A little bit about her. McClintock had worked with others, Walter Knight and Neil Fahey. She was working at the California Academy of Sciences, and she had recently published this report on the flora of the San Bruno Mountains. And in the introduction, they were aware that the mountain was threatened. It says, quote, "The pressure of metropolitan development is moving towards the San Bruno Mountains. This flora records the plants to be found there before these changes occur." And so here's an article about Elizabeth from 72. You can see her actually holding some plants from San Bruno Mountain. I believe this is the Diablo sunflower, and this may be the San Bruno Mountain manzanita. But she was advocating that, that before development happens, people are aware of what is there, that scientists be consulted. And so she was. She was consulted by the Crocker Land Company to, try to highlight sensitive areas of the mountain. It says, quote, "She is the busiest unpaid environmental impact consultant in the Bay Area." And so here, yeah, so she was involved in highlighting the importance and the uniqueness of the mountain's flora. By 72 in February, there had already been some meetings between the Crocker Land Company and the San Mateo County, and they had come to an agreement. And the agreement was that there would be a public park on the mountain, which sounds nice, and it was 1,040 acres, 520 of those to be purchased by the county and the other 520 to be dedicated. However, it should be noted that these 1,040 acres were on, quote, the south of the Canyon Parkway in the flatter lands, but this didn't include the saddle. And this is a really important point because this here is the Canyon Parkway. This is the saddle area, and here we are south and north of the Canyon Parkway. So these areas, for example, were taken off the development plans to become instead the county park, but the Crocker Land Company still wanted to develop intensely in the saddle area, the flattest area. So again, to look at it from Google Earth, this is the saddle area, and up here is more of the main ridge of San Bruno Mountain. If you look at some of the writings of the Crocker Land Company, they actually were being a little bit tricky with their language. They were calling just this San Bruno Mountain, and they weren't referring to the saddle as part of San Bruno Mountain or as the San Bruno Mountains range. They were saying that this was the mountain, and these were lower hills that weren't really part of San Bruno Mountain, and thus they weren't going to be developing on San Bruno Mountain. They had curious marketing. This here is a view of the saddle, just to give you a sense of the gentleness of this area and also its beauty. Has really lovely views all the way out to the ocean, and also perhaps most valuable for the real estate company was these views looking out towards downtown San Francisco. Now, for some time, in '72 in October, the Committee to Save San Bruno Mountain and the Crocker Land Company, which had become a subsidiary of these other corporations, like the Foremost McKesson, this massive pharmaceutical company, and other business interests, they had, in a sense, collaborated or had a truce for some time because of Proposition A. Now, this was a charter amendment that would have set aside over 6,000 acres in the county, including that 1,100 on San Bruno Mountain, and made available funds to do so. And so the Crocker Land Company let the committee go out onto the mountain, and using bags of lime, they chalked out a message onto the mountain, "Save me, yes," on A. Here's a view of some of the early committee members, Betty Higgins, Mimi Whitney, David Schooley, and others. And this is not Sign Hill. This is a hill a little bit east of Sign Hill, but still the south slopes of San Bruno Mountain. And actually, I found this photo in our office and realized when I saw this newspaper that it was from this event. You can see here Betty Higgins is wearing the same checkered shirt and her head scarf there in this photo. But this was just a momentary truce. This was not, the battle was still ongoing. This was just for some time to try to get Proposition A passed, which it did, and it passed. And so the committee went back to its battle. Here's a photo of Betty Higgins again. And for these next slides, I want to emphasize how much this battle was really organized and led by the grassroots, by working class people of Northern San Mateo County. So some quotes from Betty. "We need the parks and recreation in the North County. Once that mountain goes, all we'll have are cemeteries." Now they were also advocating for that West Bay property. So the 1,100 acres that were the Crocker Land Company was proposing as the county park didn't include the separate West Bay parcel that was owned separately on the eastern part of San Bruno Mountain that Dr. Nelson discussed in his talk. Here's Betty with Mimi, and here's an op-ed they wrote in 1974. They note that when the cry to save San Bruno Mountain was first heard, it did not come from the formal conservation groups such as the Sierra Club or Friends of the Earth. It came from the working people who are packed into the original little boxes that surround San Bruno Mountain. Here is Betty Higgins standing with the saddle in the background where development was still planned. And you can see it mapped out here. The saddle was planned to be developed. The Northeast Ridge is planned to be developed. Development also was planned for the south slopes of San Bruno Mountain. And this was that 1,100 acres that would become the county park. But the people didn't just want those 1,100 acres. They wanted more. And so they kept fighting. They had really creative ways of making their views known, including bringing live goats and costumes to public hearings. So for example, on December 12, 1974, there was a hearing of the Parks and Recreation Commission in South City. They brought a goat to emphasize that the land being set aside for parkland was mostly steep, that only hiking could be done there, and that the people wanted also the gradual, gentle part of the mountain, the saddle. They also bring up curious notes here about accessibility. They had someone come in a wheelchair to make the case that not only the steep part of San Bruno Mountain should be a park, but also the gentle part should be a park as well. This is actually the program from their farcical park hearing. You can see here them discussing what they're going to do, and that they're really focusing their energy, not on the commission, they weren't being listened to in their mind by the commission, but that they were really taking their demand to the County Board of Supervisors. They had other creative ways of doing this. They set up a kite festival on the mountain to bring people out. This was now 1975, April. They started organizing more precinct drives, newspaper advertisements, full-time headquarters, being actually just little rooms in people's homes, little additions here and there, and also tabling at shopping centers, special events, hosting exhibits, and planning more rallies. For example, one on May 4th. So here was that May 1975 rally, again marching on the mountain. Here's the view in color. I really love some of these slogans. The mountain is foremost not a McKesson. It is not foremost a corporate-owned piece of land, or it should not be, at least according to this protester. April Brook lives, thinking about the mountain as a living being who should be respected. So really great little slogans here on these signs. But there was also opposition brewing and demonstrating. For example, there were rallies by the developers, or by the labor who supported the developers. You can see here the construction workers protesting outside Redwood City with signs that say, "Birds don't vote, labor does," "Sierra Club, take a hike," "No development means no jobs," etc. They brought all their massive construction trucks to circle the county building. And they started also, there was a group that was started, the Coalition for the Concerned Citizens of San Mateo County. And so they were also pressuring for the development. They wanted this to happen. By this time, the development was called Crocker Hills, not Visitation Rancho. The names had changed. There was some momentum that was given to the Save the Mountain Committee when a state senator, Edwin L. Zeeberg, he kind of fit a provision for $4 million into an assembly bill, 2329. You can see here a press release from the Save San Bruno Mountain Committee, happy about this, and other groups as well. The county endorsed this provision, but they were careful to note that it didn't necessarily mean this money would be used to purchase the saddle, which was where the Crocker Land Company was still trying to get their areas built. Curiously, on the date where they accepted this, or when they endorsed this bill, Edwin Zeeberg died of a heart attack just a few days after he had proposed this in August 27, 1975. Now, there were a few more protests on the mountain. Here's David Schooley, a founder of San Bruno Mountain Watch, in color, reenacting the Battle of Colma, a battle against land speculators. And there's Mimi Whitney. But there was one last public meeting. So by this time, the San Mateo County Planning Commission had approved of the development, but it had to go to the County Board of Supervisors for their final say. And so the Board of Supervisors held a lot of public meetings. This one was to be in the 29th of January. So you can see here the construction workers organizing, labor organizing to bring people out. And it was a pretty rowdy meeting. On one side, he wants the mountain developed. On the other side, she wants it preserved. You can see here the hard hats. You can see here people of all ages on both sides of the issue. If you notice this little button here, we actually have one of the original buttons in our office. After 45 years, the black text still looks pretty bold. The orange Crocker Hills is fading a bit. And you can see some quotes here from the development side, a construction worker, quote, "I am damn tired of these damn termites who want to save lilies and flowers," grumbled construction worker Ralph Corral. "You can't eat lilies and flowers." And on the Save San Bruno Mountain side, Mimi Whitney, who delivered a petition with 22,000 anti-Crocker signatures. Now this came down to one supervisor, Ed Batioco. And you can see here, he's an English and being in the middle. Of the 5 supervisors, 2 were known to be in favor of development, 2 were known to be opposed to it, or not all development, but to development on the saddle. And he was considered the swing vote. People really didn't know what he was going to do. So March 1976 is when the vote happened. And Ed Batioco, even though it was a tough choice for him, he had received a lot of labor backing in his election, but he voted against the development in the saddle. Now, this wasn't limiting development everywhere. It was just saying that the saddle should remain an open space, that development could happen on the Northeast Ridge and on the South Slopes, which later it did. For example, the Northeast Ridge here in Brisbane and the South Slopes looking at areas in Terra Bay developments. Now, this wasn't over. Also in 76, Jean Fassler, one of the supervisors who had voted to keep the saddle in open space, she retired. And so there was an election to fill her seat. The committee had to organize to support the pro-environmental candidate because they were worried that if McRobert Stewart, a lumberman from Daly City, if he was elected and the issue came back to the county, that he would switch the balance of the vote, and that the saddle would be developed. But they won that election, and it still wasn't over. There were a lot of lawsuits that were filed, and this is where the history kind of stops because I'm running short on time. But eventually, a few years later, led to the formation of San Bruno Mountain State and County Park. And so this was that crucial decade that allowed for the development of this public parkland on San Bruno Mountain. Now, post 76, there's a lot more to see. You can take a look at our archives, our digital history project. It's still growing. There's a lot more that we're adding to it, but there's a link there if you want to poke around. And also, I just want to acknowledge that this year we're celebrating this half century of people's movements to save San Bruno Mountain. And so I invite you to join us to become a member of San Bruno Mountain Watch and to join the movement. So thank you all so much for your attention, and yeah, thank you.